Hello, this is Jeff Vanderstelt, Executive Director of Saturate and host of the Saturate podcast. Saturate exists to serve and equip leaders to start and strengthen unified gospel city movements that lead to gospel saturation, to the end that every woman, man, and child has repeated opportunities to meet Jesus through his church on mission everywhere and every day. We believe this will require, as Jesus prayed in John 17, that the church is unified in a region and collaborating around 5 key priorities or initiatives. We find these in Acts 13 to 14 as Luke records Paul's missionary journey, and they are a commitment to prayer, and that's not just a talking to God, but a listening prayer, a posture of discerning where is the Spirit leading, that we would collaborate around disciple-making strategies. Third, that we would be committed together to make sure leaders are healthy and thriving. Fourth, that we would serve our cities in tangible ways so they see the kingdom of God breaking in. And then fifth, that we would start new churches and new kingdom expressions that are embodying the same 4 principles that I just stated. Now, today we're going to do something unique. A lot of times on our podcast, we focus on just one of those with a guest. But today we're going to be talking with somebody who's been a friend of mine for now a couple years. And he, in some ways, does a lot of the same work that I'm doing in the United States. And that is helping cities think through how do we focus on those 5 priorities for the sake of seeing a gospel city movement happen. And so today we're going to get to be with Nic Harding. He's the director of Kairos Connection. He is also leads City Reaching UK. He's the founding pastor of Frontline Church in Liverpool. He's also a doctor, so that's where he's definitely different than me and more qualified in another area, actually a real doctor. He's a church planner, a network leader. He's married to Jenny and has 4 grown daughters and 8 grandchildren. Man, what a amazing blessing. And he has moved his family to Liverpool a while ago, back in 1991, to plant Frontline Church, a church that grew to 1,000 people. And now he leads a regional missional network and a national city reaching network. So, man, Nic, he's, by the way, a little bit older than me. So he's a much wiser sage than I am. And yet we get to learn from each other. It's been a real joy to get to share what we're doing together in our own context. So, Nic, thank you so much for being here. And I'd love to have you share any more that you'd like us to know about you so people can become more familiar with you.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeff. It's so good to be with you today. And for those who are listening, to be with you too. And thank you for this opportunity to connect. I am short, vertically challenged. That's one of my growing up little things I had to kind of contend with. So with the shrinkage of age, I think I'm now about 5'5". So you can now, imagine me against any kind of benchmark that you fancy. I grew up in the south of England, and myself and my sister were both enthusiastic springboard divers. First of all, gymnastics, then springboard diving. And I got to train with some of the Olympic representatives of Great Britain. I was never at that standard, but it was an inspiring place to be. And, I still like to try and keep agile. So with advancing years, I am slowing down a bit, but I'm as passionate about the gospel and about the church as I have ever been, as passionate about Jesus and his kingdom as I have ever been. Somebody said to me recently, Nic, when are you actually going to retire? And I said, well, the problem is, I don't do a job. I pursue a passion, and you can't retire from a passion. So I think I'm here to stay, and maybe that's enough for me. Yeah.
Oh, man. I didn't know that you were in gymnastics and springboard dive. There you go. I learned something new just now. You're the perfect size for it in some ways, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally.
That's awesome. Well, I'm not a lot taller than you. I used to be about 5'8.5", and I think I'm now down to 5'7.5". So my wife says I'm shrinking. That's not a good story, I guess, but I'll join you in that. We can fit in airplanes a lot better, right?
Oh, that's the one time I rejoice in it. Yeah, totally.
Yes, yeah.
I hate it when I'm in a crowd or I'm in a church and there's a really tall person in front of me. Really frustrating. When I get in the airplane, I think it was all worth it.
I love it. Okay, so your passion, yeah, I love that you stated that because I haven't been asked the same thing because I'm in my mid-50s, but I anticipate being asked the same thing, and I think I'll probably have a similar answer because I don't know how do you shut down passion. It is so key to everything we're doing, and it's not a job.
Mm.
It's a calling, and so
Mm.
I'm curious for you. When did you become passionate specifically around city reaching? I mean, that's what we talk about a lot here. Is how do we see and equip and mobilize a city reaching team in different cities? So when did you become passionate about that, and why?
I think for me, I'd become a Christian as a 12-year-old from a non-Christian home, so it was all brand new to me. And I think it was when I was 19 years old. I spent a summer with Youth with a Mission, some time on a campsite in France, in Paris, and then some time on a houseboat in Amsterdam. And I just begun to see two things. Firstly, that the power of the gospel to change lives, and secondly, the power of community in working together and growing as disciples together, going out on mission together. And I just caught a glimpse of something. And so coming back to where I was in coming back into my second year of medical studies at Bristol University, my future fiance, she didn't know she was going to be my fiance then, or my wife. She'd done a YWAM mission as well, and we were friends in college. And we looked for a church, and we found this little tiny house church, just 12 people in the front room. And yet we knew we were instantly at home as soon as we walked in the door. And that was our home for the next 18 years in Bristol. And it was during that time, with my YWAM experience and my house church experience, I began to see both the power of the gospel and the potential of the church. And as we lived in the city of Bristol, I just began to dream about what would it look like to see this city impacted with the gospel? What would it look like to see, churches affecting every community? I didn't have the language for it then, and I didn't have any of the kind of ideas and ways of doing things that we have now. But that's when it began to grow. And I think, reaching a whole city was probably, city reaching wouldn't have been in my vocabulary then, but it was exactly what I was about. And one of the hardest things about leaving Bristol was feeling like I'd left before I'd seen it happen. But, when God calls you on, you have to go.
Man. Yeah, it's interesting how many of our origin stories or our coming to faith stories, those earlier stages of our formation, form our our calling and a sense of deep conviction. You're probably not the only one who has something like a YWAM experience, or in my case, when I first came to Christ, the first person that poured into me was a navigator, and he introduced me to the Master Plan of Evangelism book, with Coleman's book. And so like very early on, it's like, we're here to be disciples who make disciples. And so to just hear how, YWAM is such a key influencer in a lot of people's lives. And the vision it creates for, I think, mission and community combined. We don't do this alone, that God's called us not only to a purpose, but to do it with a people. So, man, I am curious. So you were a part of a house church in Bristol. You were there for a long time.
Yep.
What? Tell us a little bit more about that. What was the experience like? What did you see happen over those 18 years? I know you can't tell everything, but what are some highlights? Because there are a lot of people even considering, do we start new forms of churches, which are really old forms of churches that people are calling them micro churches these days. But tell us a little bit more about your experience there and what you witnessed.
Well, if I give you the glossy version, I would tell you
lots of pain, I'm sure, too.
Yeah. Over those 18 years, we saw the church grow to about 700 or 800 people. And, it was the early days of the charismatic movement. We were kind of pioneering in all sorts of different areas that, the denominational established churches were catching up on over the following couple of decades. But as with the majority of the house church movement in the UK at that time, we failed in one major area, or we had one false belief. The false belief was, if you love one another well enough, the lost will come flocking to your door. And so we really focused on loving each other really well. We did community really, really well. We were in and out of each other's homes. We were sharing everything we owned. It wasn't a common financial pot, but it was like, yeah, you expected to be sharing your finances with other people, and yet we did not see the new birth growth that we were believing for. And I think that's probably where I began to disconnect from that church. I mean, I felt so burdened about it that I came out of my medical career as a GP to set up a full-time evangelism team, training team, because I wanted to reintroduce, gospel focus and training people in evangelism. And I just had this awful moment when I realized this isn't working. And I just thought, no, I'm desperate to be part of a church where mission is front and center of church life. And there were fantastic people. I love them dearly. We're still in touch with some of them today. But as a church, as a whole body of people, it wasn't the leading beat. And I just felt like, no, if it's not the leading beat, it's going to fall off the back end somewhere. It's going to be a project or an add-on or a one-off or a mission project. But it's that was my big learning through the house church movement. If you don't have mission front and center, if it's not the leading beat or the heartbeat of your communities, then they eventually will become inward looking and they won't flourish, they won't prosper, they won't multiply. So I would say it was a mixed experience, one of great innovation, great trying new things out, freed from the trappings of the traditional churches and the early days of the charismatic movement and all the excitement of that. But we missed it on this one specific thing, which I deeply regret, but probably wasn't in a position to make that change. I wasn't the lead pastor. I didn't have influence over the leadership team, although I was part of it. And that's one of the reasons that we felt we had to move and start something fresh.
I love Christopher Wright's statement, the church doesn't have a mission, the mission has a church. And that, God is a missionary God. And the reason why he has a people called the church is because he's on mission. And it's his church through which he accomplishes that mission. And so I love that emphasis. And I think a lot of listeners, I'm sure, would say it's so easy to lose sight of that primary focus and get off on tertiary issues and even have great things like community and great experiences together as we walk in the Spirit, which are all imperative to the mission, but they are ultimately for the sake of the mission. Not the mission is not to take the side seat here. So yeah. Well, I'm curious. So that led you to actually move. You can step into a new thing, and I know that's part of what I think was part of your expression of saying, like, how can we be about reaching a whole city as you moved to Liverpool, right? That was the next step for you guys?
Yep, 1991, 33 years ago, 12 of us. It was like, the funny thing was, it was like a replica of 18 years previously. We were 12 of us from the church. They were wonderfully generous in blessing us with some of their best people to come and plant a church in Liverpool.
Man, I love that.
And so 12 of us moved up. And again, so we started with 12 in our front room, just like the 12 in the front room we joined 18 years previously. I sometimes describe that 18 years as my 18 years apprenticeship. And finally, after 18 years, God said, okay, Nic, I think I can trust you to do something by yourself now.
Oh,
and,
man.
Let me have a go. Yeah.
So tell us about that in terms of your local experience in Liverpool. Like, what did you see happen there? And I know part of this is leading into, like, what are you presently doing in terms of attempting to do that, not only in your own context, but helping others around the country. So tell us a little more about your local experience.
Sure. Well, we arrived, started in the front room, grew rapidly. Some people coming to faith because we came on a missional basis. So everybody was looking for those opportunities, looking for what we'd now call people of peace. And so we started to see people saved. Students started coming along. Heavens knows why, because we were a ragtag and bobtail group of people. But they seemed to love it. We went into a local community center. And then something really interesting happened, which I was not prepared for. I met the person who became my co-pastor. He was leading another small group. He was a local, if you're born and bred in Liverpool, you're called a Scouser. So he was a local Scouser through and through. And it was the most unlikely match, but we called it a marriage made in heaven. And we worked together. We co-pastored the church for 24 years. So I want to give him credit for all that he brought to the church, which was wonderful. and very different in giftings. I think between the two of us, we covered at least 4 of the Ephesians 4 giftings, so
I love it.
which was a great start. But what happened was the church began to grow quite rapidly. And again, I can say we grew to 1,000 adults and kids and make it sound wonderful. But on reflection, the big learning was that we lost the essence of the missional small group, and we started to focus on the bigger gathering. Now, I love bigger gatherings. I love the corporate worship, the presence of God, the release of the gifts, the quality of teaching, et cetera, et cetera. I love all that. But because that was taking more and more of our time and our energy in managing it and growing it, we took our foot off the gas on the missional small groups, because we started with missional small groups. We called them strike groups. I don't know why we called them that, but the church was called Frontline, so maybe it fitted with the military metaphor, like little bands of soldiers. But we kind of we lost that a bit. We tried different permutations of it. At one point, we connected into the whole G12 network globally, which was actually a period of rapid growth for us because it was so missional. But the big eventually sucked the life out of the small, and that was one of my big learnings during that time. I think I would say I was seduced by the allure of the big, and I don't feel very proud about that. And there was a point where God humbled us, and I won't go into all of the details there, but there's a lot of things went wrong at a particular point about 15 years ago, and He humbled us, and I realized I'd taken my eye off the goal. I'd taken my eye off the beauty of the simplicity of church in the house and missional small groups, and I'd become seduced by the attraction of the big and the platform, the influence, being the biggest church in the city, et cetera, et cetera. That stuff goes to your head after a while, and you lose sight of actually what God's trying to do, and you end up asking God to bless your plans and asking God what His plans are. So it was a hard. There's 2 or 3 years we went through where we lost a lot of people. Various projects failed. There was a problem with the leadership that was difficult. But through it all, I think the vision for what the church could be grew brighter and brighter and brighter. And that's why I'm still passionate about the church today, rather than cynical. Because I love the bride of Christ. I absolutely love the bride of Christ. I see its potential, and I see its potential to saturate a geography with the gospel. And I think if we're ever going to complete the Great Commission, that's my dream, is in our own location. Lord, could we please complete the Great Commission? Could we reach every man, woman, and child with the gospel? Could we saturate our city region with the gospel? Our city region is about 1.5 million people. Could we have a missional expression of church from micro to macro for every 1,000 people? And could everybody know of a local group of believers where they could go on a spiritual journey to find faith in Christ as well as receive practical help? Could we do that, Lord? Since we handed on the church 10 years ago to younger leaders, that's been the driving force of my life, really, working with a wide group of leaders in the region here and starting to work with groups of leaders across the cities in the nation.
Man, I love your heart and your humility too, Nic. I'm so thankful that you're willing to say, hey, here's where we missed it. Here's where we got off track. Here's where we even got a little bit allured. You're not the only one. I think it's the challenge of all of us in leadership is to lose sight of the initial call of God and to get sidetracked by the size, the platform, the opportunities. And so thank you for your honesty about that. What does it look like now locally for you? What are you actively involved in? We'll talk first locally, and then let's talk a little bit about some of the stuff that's going on in the country as well.
Sure. The local stuff for me is around sort of 2 frameworks. One is very, very local, and it's kind of, my conviction around leadership is leadership needs to continue to model what is preaching, not only in terms of faith sharing, not only in terms of raising disciples, maturing and growing leaders, but also in planting, new things. So at a very local level, within our own church, within Frontline Church, and within and out of, we've been just blessed to be able to start to pioneer some new microchurches. And to me, honestly, Jeff, that is the most fun thing I do because it's so organic. It's so chaotic at times. It's so glorious. It's so wonderful to see people coming to faith and just super excited about all they're discovering with no church background whatsoever, and seeing them start to grow into leadership and want to take responsibility and think, oh, we could multiply this, starting with that, what I call wet cement kind of people who haven't got a whole bunch of church baggage to get through and mindsets to shift and change and denominational ways of doing things to kind of jettison. It's just so refreshing. And it's early days. We've got 2.5 little micro churches off the ground so far, and I am absolutely loving it. Raising up leaders to take them on and thinking about how do we start to build a network around that. Linked still to Frontline Church, still part of Frontline, but also more autonomous than a traditional home group would be. So that's the kind of grassroots stuff. And even this last week, just 2 exciting things. Jenny and I, we live in a street which has got a primary school, so we're an under 11 age school in our street, and it's been one of our kind of missional focus points for quite a while. Praying for it for a long time. Jenny started to get. Jenny's my wife, by the way. Jenny started to get influence in the school when she just felt God prompting her to go and start baking cakes for the staff about 4, maybe 5 years ago. She just started, but every week she'd take a fresh bunch of cakes, and she became the cake lady. But through that, God just opened the door, and we've been able to do all sorts of wonderful projects with the school. They love us. They've given us keys to the school. Can you believe it? We actually have keys to the school.
Wow.
And they get us in when they feel like we can help them out. But one of the things Jenny does still, every week she goes in and she supports children with their reading, just listens to them read. And she got talking to one of the teaching assistants a week ago, and she got to ask about church, and she's Polish, and we've got a Polish congregation in our church. So they were talking about it, and she hadn't even told her where Frontline was, but last Sunday she rocks up in church, looking for God. I think, wow, that's fantastic. We've had a lovely Italian lady staying with us. We have language students staying with us from time to time. We've got a wonderful Italian lady, super sweet lady, 60 years old, very, very nominal Catholic background, no real experience of God, but she wanted the full British experience of being here. So we said, she arrived on a Saturday, and we said, well, tomorrow we're going to church. She said, well, can I come with you? So yes, of course you can. And of course it completely blew her away. And she comes back the following Sunday and absolutely loves it. She says, oh, can I come to your community? I said, yeah, you can come to our community. Literally, the first time she ever visits, the church in our house, she starts praying out loud. I think, well, where did that come from? She's probably never prayed out loud in her life. And she's just, she's feeling the love. She's just kind of carried along by the sense of the presence of God among us and joins in with the prayers. And I think she's found faith. I don't know quite how.
That's awesome.
In just 2.5 weeks of being with us. And I just, this is the stuff that gets me out of bed in the morning, Jeff. Seeing people come to faith, seeing lives mature and grow, seeing people become disciple makers, raised as leaders, starting new things. It's just, so that level of local stuff is what I really love, totally love it.
It's one of the things I loved about, the little bit of time I got to be with you in your home with your community is experiencing the hospitality, experiencing the love for one another. And even then hearing the stories of you still being, you and Jenny still being on the ground, still doing the everyday work of mission. I think a lot of times leaders who get the opportunity to influence others, they pull out of that. And then they talk about something they used to do, but they're not doing it anymore. And I love the fact that your passion keeps leading you to keep practically doing it in your own neighborhood, on your own street, in your own home. I'd say for any leader listening, that's where it always begins. It's out of the overflow of your own life that you create a culture around you. And so we have to live out what we believe and are convicted to. So yeah, I love that about what you're doing. One thing that you said there that I also love too, I'm getting to experience the same thing as you in terms of leading a micro church. Got people who are not part of a church who've now come to faith. They don't have any of the trappings of the church. And just a week ago, one of them said, because they have said to me, we realize we need to learn how to lead one of these ourselves. They're probably moving back to a different place in a few years. And the wife, who's become, this couple's become very dear friends to Janie and I. And she said, I've been thinking about this kind of experience we could create. And she begins to describe what now many would know as the Emmanuel prayer. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but it's like really inviting yourself to be present with God's presence with you, and beginning to journal out what he sees and that he's here present with you and he wants to help you. And it's a very intimate interaction with God. And she starts to describe, I would like to lead something like this sometime. And she doesn't know that that this exists, like that there's actually a thing called the Emmanuel prayer, but she's describing leading us to be present with God and present with self and invite God's presence into our own challenges and stories. I'm like, the Spirit of God is leading this woman. I mean, she's coming up with such beautiful ways to lead people into the presence of God and lead others into the truth of Jesus. So that's one of the things I love too, is just seeing people come alive and seeing the Spirit move in their lives. So you and I are co-patriots in that and getting to learn that and
Amen.
Celebrate that. Yeah.
Amen.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the work that's beginning to emerge in the UK in terms of city reaching. And, just, I know it's in a lot of ways we're in incubation stages. The stuff you're doing is there's fingers of beginnings, and some are further along than others. But tell us a little bit more about that. And if you want to talk about Kairos Connection as well as the UK reaching stuff, it's great. Talk about both, but love to hear about some of that larger work that you're beginning to do, maybe in Liverpool, but also in UK.
Sure. Well, I'll back up a bit to what's happening in Liverpool first.
Yeah.
The Liverpool City Region, we've got a charity that we work under here called Together for the Harvest. Myself and about 4 other pastors formed it about 4 years after I'd arrived in the city. When you first arrive, you just got your head down trying to get everything working and growing and what have you. But then eventually your head comes above sort of the parapet. You think, oh, there's a wider church out here. And we used to have this saying in Frontline Church. I used to ask the congregation, now, how many churches are there in Liverpool? And, first of all, scratching their heads and think, oh, I don't know. Is it this? Is it this? But after a while, they cottoned on really quickly. There is one church in Liverpool, and we are part of it. And so that whole idea of unity started to grow in Together for the Harvest. And it became a unity movement for churches who love Jesus, for churches who honor Scripture, for churches that are on a mission and who are sharing in that mission together. As time went on, it became more and more focused on the mission. In the last 5 years, I would say, in particular. And so we've tried to articulate, the strapline has always been reaching every man, woman, and child with the gospel. But we didn't really have much idea how to do that. And so it was like try this and try that. And it went off in all sorts of directions. And I think one of the difficulties in the early stages of Together for the Harvest was we were quite event orientated. And so that used to frustrate me quite a lot. And because I think unless you have really good processes in place to take you from A to B, you just do the next good idea that comes into your head. But gradually the process ideas started to dovetail with the events, and we began to realize, okay, we're a city region. We're made up of Liverpool and several towns and smaller villages around it. And so we began to think, well, how do we do that? So really, I think it's really in the last year, Jeff, and it's really since we've engaged with you and with Saturate, I think we've started to model something that we're now trying to replicate in other cities around the UK. And so we've fully embraced those 5 priorities. They were similar to things we were already running with, but gave fresh language and fresh impetus. And we've just today come back from our retreat day as a board for Together for the Harvest. And it was like 1 year ago, when we were on the same retreat a year ago, that we officially adopted those 5 priorities and said, yes, we're going to start looking more strategically at how we do things. And so the last year has been building the strategic element alongside the prophetic element, alongside the leadership element and the unity element, thinking strategically about our city region. And so as we've embraced those 5 priorities, we've recognized that the weakest were the disciple-making strategies and the church planting. And we haven't done a lot on the disciple-making strategies yet, but we are starting to do quite a lot on the front end of that, which is how do we see the church mobilized to see people come to faith? Because you can't mature disciples until you've made disciples. So we often talk about making and growing disciples, to emphasize that we have to see people won to the Lord first before we can make them as disciples. So we've quite a lot of emphasis on that, on sort of equipping the church. We've set up an evangelism strategy team, with the help of the Palau organization, who have been a blessing to us. And that evangelism strategy team has launched its first big project, which is a 4 points project. It's a simple wristband and little tract that uses 4 points to describe the gospel. It's been around a long time. It was created by someone in our own church. And next Easter, there will be, on Easter Day, Easter Sunday, there will be dozens and dozens of churches all across the region with these big 4 points across the church. The month before that, there will be dozens of buses will have the 4 points logo down their side. It's a heart, it's a cross, you've done something wrong, it's the cross of Christ, and it's the question mark, what will you do about it? Followed by the date of Easter Sunday, without any more information there. It's like a teaser campaign. So we'll do that for a whole month right across the city region. No one will be able to miss it. Cars will have the stickers on their cars. But here's the key. The event will be great. Loads of people will come to faith. But the real key is the training. And so for January and February, in the lead up to the month of mission in March, we're going to train people in all the 6 boroughs in missional confidence. Our aim is to train 1,000 people. Now, that's just like a beginning, because we want to see everybody equipped with missional confidence. And we've done a fair bit of work on that in the past, but this is a whole new level of strategy. And if we're going to have a disciple-making strategy, it has to start with gospel confidence, with missional confidence. So that's one thing that's happening in our region right now as we speak. The other thing I'm really excited about is, again, another new initiative, which we've taken some inspiration from Chad Clarkson and the Houston Church Planting Network, in terms of a church planting network. So we've started something called a Church Planting Coalition. And we've had 2 gatherings so far. The first was kind of exploratory. The second was, what are the next steps? Still very early days, but so exciting to see the range of people in the room who are either planting churches already, are about to plant a church, want to plant a church, or are an established plant, who are sending others to plant. So, and the range of people in the room is wonderful. Multiple ethnicities. We had our second gathering this week, in fact, and we had people from African ethnicities. We had people from Asian ethnicities, and mixture of all sorts of people planting churches from different backgrounds. The thing that really excites me, though, is we have a whole bunch of people from really reformed church backgrounds who are, traditionally can be difficult to connect with because they tend to have their own way of doing things. They're actually some of the most successful church planters in our city, and I take my hat off to them. I love them dearly. So we have them at one end of the spectrum, and we have crazy Pentecostals at the other end of the spectrum, and they're all in the room together saying, "Okay, how could we do this better together?" And there's just sense of buy-in to the idea that if we're going to saturate our city with the gospel, and we're going to saturate our city region with missional expressions of church, then we've got to do this better together. And so we've started to develop some shared resources, looking at shared prayer support. We're looking at a shared online platform for planters, and we're starting to think about shared training, and hopefully eventually it will lead to actually shared planting. I think that's a little way down the road. So that's so exciting. My heart just was buzzing on Tuesday as these 35, 36 church planters were in the room together, dreaming together, praying together, and buying into a bigger vision that's beyond their own church, beyond their own stream and denomination. So, we've got all the other things going on, lots of social action stuff, lots of prayer stuff, not much leader health. We're starting to address that right now. But these 2 things, the evangelism leading into disciple-making strategies and the beginnings of a church planting saturation 1 in 1,000 strategy, are the things that make my heart sing.
Oh man, that is so exciting. I'm smiling the whole time you're talking because I'm just so thankful for what you're getting to experience and seeing you just so alive and so passionate. I mean, the listeners don't know, but you and I get to connect a couple times a month when we're able to do it, and just to hear that's the first I've even heard, because we didn't get to check in on all that. But you told me you were encouraged about the previous meeting, so that's great news. And for those who are listening, there are some cities who've been doing this for a long time. Like Portland in Oregon has been building around those 5 priorities for quite some time. And the Luis Palau organization, who I know you're connected with too, has been leading the way in some cases. And so, like you mentioned, Chad Clarkson and Houston Church Planting Network. More recently, they adopted those 5, but they kind of were doing them, but just not very clear on them. But they were knocking it out of the park when it came to church planting. And so it's really exciting to see us learning from other cities. I mean, that's one of the other strengths I think that we have is we not only can we do this together in our own city and see that we're all better together, but then city to city, we can say, how can we encourage each other, share the stories of what God is doing from Seattle to Liverpool to Tokyo, even, some of these places that we get to talk and share with each other the stories of God and in our own context. So, and you're trying to do that now in your country, in the UK. Let's talk a little bit more about that and how some of the work that's starting to take place. And I'm going to get to be there in a couple of weeks, so I can't wait to be with you and some of the city leaders. But yeah, share a little bit more about the broader work within the country.
Well, it was you and Todd Milby that gave me the confidence to go for it about, I don't know what, 18 months, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I finally found people who speak the same language as me. Sometimes you feel like Elijah the prophet. I alone am left, O Lord. There's no one else like me. It's obviously it's a very prideful thing to think, but to find people who share the same passion, use similar language, understand the heartbeat. So connecting with you and Todd Milby of Catapult gave me the courage to start doing this, and having you come over, the two of you, and help us in our gatherings and ongoing encouragement has been actually massively helpful. So Saturate's a huge part of what we're trying to do, and we're very, very grateful for you, Jeff, and for Saturate and for all that you bring to the table. So we had our first gathering a year ago. We've got our next one in 2 weeks' time. We had about 12 cities, including Tokyo, around the table, about 35 people there. And that was a really encouraging start to say, look, why can't we do this? My conviction, Jeff, is that if we really got our act together as leaders, if we just dropped all our barriers and petty kingdom building mindsets and thought, what could we do for the gospel in our city? And we started to truly work together and pool our resources, that we could complete the Great Commission in 10 years. I truly believe that.
Yeah.
And so just beginning to share something of this vision with other leaders, obviously, being around a long time, I have a lot of connections in a lot of other cities in the UK, which is kind of my starting point. Very encouraging start. So we've got a second gathering coming up. I think I'm beginning to sense something of the weight of what this means to try and build a movement. Because in my estimation, and again, I could be proved wrong, but I don't think there's anybody else working nationally into city reaching with gospel saturation. There's lots of other unity movements going on, but nobody, as far as I'm aware, is looking at the completion of the Great Commission through gospel saturation, reaching every man, woman, and child with the gospel, planting 1 in 1,000 missional expressions. I don't know anybody else who's doing that. And so I just feel, even at my advanced age, I'm setting my next 10 years out, my stall for the next 10 years, given health and all the rest of it. I want to give myself to this for the next 10 years because I passionately believe it's the heart of God. Ultimately, it's so Jesus can come back. We get the job done. Jesus comes back. Bang. We're happy days. How far we'll get in my lifetime, I don't know, but I want to give it my best shot. So gathering these leaders, and I think I'm looking at new ways of investing in those groups of leaders from different cities over the coming year, looking at bringing some coaching calls into place on a monthly basis. I feel hugely optimistic about the future. And I think what I'm seeing, Jeff, is that there is an appetite for it. People haven't either had the language for it, or they haven't had any kind of idea of a strategic framework in which it could possibly happen. And so most cities are dabbling around the edges. They'll do this joint social action stuff together. They'll do their Unity for Prayer stuff together. They'll do their leaders retreats together. support each other. But it's like, could we actually do this? And I think the language that's coming, the strategic ideas that are coming in are giving people a hope, even though honestly, some days it seems like an impossible task. But then what did the angel say to Mary? Nothing will be impossible. Nothing would be impossible. And, all things are possible for those who believe. So we have to believe that if Jesus is trying to prepare his bride for his return, because one of my convictions, Jeff, is that one of the key ways the bride is going to be prepared is not by sitting in holy huddles getting ever more sanctified, but by completing the job he's given us to do. I think that's where we get sanctified. That's where we become holy. That's where we become mature as the body of Christ, as Ephesians 4 describes, this mature man, the stature of the fullness of Christ. It's through engaging with his mission. It's completing the task he gave us to do. Yeah. And just on that for a moment, I love the fact that Jesus knew what he was called to do. Luke 4, he describes, this is what I was sent for. And John 17 in the garden, he says, I thank you, Father, I completed the work. I glorified you.
Yes.
And we often talk about glorifying God, but he says, I glorified you by completing the work you gave me to do. Wouldn't it be amazing if as city leaders all across this nation, across your nation, we got to the end of our lives, say, thank you, Jesus. I have completed the work you gave me to do. As a group of city leaders, we sat down one day and we said, you know what? Everybody in this city knows somebody whose life's been changed by Jesus. Everybody knows of a local group of believers where they can go to for practical help and on a spiritual journey of faith. Everybody. And we thought, wow, do you know what? I think we've done it. And of course, it never ends because people are being born and dying all the time and people are moving and coming and going. But, at one point we would say, I thank you, Father. I've glorified you, Father, by completing the work you gave me to do. That would I could die happy at that moment. I really could.
Man, amen. This is why you and I are working together. We just have similar heartbeats for the cities we're in and the country we're a part of and the world, frankly. And so, Nic, I'm so thankful for you. I would love to, two things. One, if people want to learn more about what you're doing or get connected, because my hope is that there'll even be some in your own country that are listening going, hey, I want to connect in more with what's happening there. Where would people go if they wanted to find out more about you or the work you're doing, either with in your own city, but also maybe in the country?
Well, a couple of websites would take you to some general information. Together for the Harvest, it's tfh.org.uk. And the Kairos Connexion website, which embraces the national city reaching element, which is the only bit I'm now doing. The rest of Kairos Connection, we've got a new director who's covering that. But the city reaching piece, and then you can go to the Kairos Connection website. It's Kairos, as in the Greek word Kairos, connection spelt with an X, like the Methodist connection, CONNEXION.org. So those are the two websites. But if anyone wants to get in touch with me, just drop me an email. It's Nic, N-I-C, no K on it, N-I-C at kairosconnection.org. I'd happily be in touch with anyone who wants to make a connection.
That's awesome. And we'll also have that information as well so that people can find it in the information under the podcast description. So the last thing I wanted to ask is like any final words as people are thinking about their city, their church, their city, their context. What would you want to say as parting words of exhortation or encouragement?
Wow, thank you. First of all, don't give up. Don't give up. It's so easy to give up and settle for something that is comfortable, convenient, and often consumerist. Please don't give up because the kingdom is worth it. Jesus is worth it. And secondly, I would say humble yourself when you've made mistakes, admit them. Humble yourself amongst your fellow leaders because there's no faster way to build trust than to be honest about who you are, the struggles you have. And I think it's in that place of connecting with each other that we will find the shared wisdom of God and the courage that comes from heaven to embrace some of these big challenges for our city and our regions. So I'd love us to just believe that God is with us. I was with a small group last night, and I just felt God gave me this word for them, and it's come back to my mind right now, which is know who you are. We are children of God, called on a mission, called into community, called to reach our towns and cities with the gospel, called to prepare the bride of Christ, called to get the job done. Know who you are and believe it. Act out of that identity as children of God, called on a mission, called into community, called to reach our cities. That's it.
Thank you. So good. Nic, it's good to be with you. I can't wait to see you in a few weeks. Thanks for all that you're doing. Thanks for these words. Thanks for your heart. Really appreciate you.
My absolute pleasure, Jeff. Thank you.
Well, I'm so thankful for Nic and his voice in the UK and the work he's doing there. If you're from the UK, I encourage you to reach out, get connected to any one of the city teams that he's working with. He'll help you with that. And I just want to thank you again for joining us and supporting us. A lot of you support us through prayer, others through financial support. And there may be some of you that are listening realizing that you didn't know you could be a partner with us. And so if that's something you're interested in, you can send an email to hello@saturatetheworld.com if you'd like to be a prayer partner. And that's basically me sending out a text to let people know how to pray a couple times a month and letting you know how God's answering those prayers. So we don't believe any of this is going to take place apart from the Spirit of God at work. And we believe that prayer is really the heavy lifting where we lean into God to do the work. So we'd love for you to consider that. If you want to consider being a financial partner, a lot of what we're doing is supported by our partners, and it allows us to serve people all over the world. And it's a real honor to know that we're not alone in this. So if that's you, go to saturatetheworld.com. You can click on Give. It'll give you next steps to take. We really do need support and would love to have you partner with us. Also, we have created a new offering called the Disciple Making Lab. And so for people who are wanting to grow their disciple-making strategy, rebuild it, redesign it. We work with church leadership teams, taking them through a 10-month journey in a cohort-style learning. And you can find more about that on our site. Again, saturatetheworld.com. Go to training, and you can click on Disciple Making Lab. It'll give you more information. We just want to serve you as many ways as possible and are grateful for the work you're doing and pray you're blessed as you continue to follow the Lord in your place.